I'm going to share some best practices for preparing your Blender model for use in Unity. So I have a Blender model open, and the first thing I'm going to do is delete things that I just don't need. If you have anything other than the model itself first, like a floor, walls, you want to select and just hit delete to remove those. Because I'm basically going to create the world itself over in Unity. I just need the objects themselves. The other element that you'll want to delete is that you probably have cameras and lighting that were created with Blender, and we don't need the same ideas that we're going to have those created in Unity. So you can choose any cameras that you might have and any lighting and just hit delete. Get rid of these extra objects. And then while I'm over here in the collection area, it's a good time to check if objects have been named properly. So all of these sub objects are going to be visible with this same naming convention once I bring them into Unity, and it's a lot easier to control the object if it's just named well. This one looks really good, like I1, I2, head, leg, mouth. Those are logical names, and it's just going to make it a lot easier to work on. So take a minute and click in your objects and double click to name them if you need to before you take them over into Unity. If you go into your object properties, you might take a look at scale and rotation information. And for example, these objects have been scaled in the process of making the robot. Best practice is to have the rotation at 0 and scale at 1 before bringing it into Unity. Basically, it's because you're going to be applying transformations in Unity, and it's going to be a lot easier if they don't start with kind of unusual values. So there's a way of applying your scale. First, I'm in the select tool. I just dragged there to select all the objects. And then I'm going to use Control A, like all, and this brings up the apply menu. And I'm going to click on rotation and scale. And what's interesting is my object still appears to be the same size, but if you look over at the properties, it's kind of reset the values to 0 for rotation, 1 for scale. So again, that was selecting the objects and then Control A for apply, choose rotation and scale. If you're on Mac, that's going to be Command A to bring up the apply menu and then choose rotation and scale. It can also make sense to reset the origin in your model so that it's in a logical location, like the very bottom center of the robot is a good origin for mine. And if the origin's not really in a meaningful position, it might create extra work when you bring it into Unity. Like if you had a tree and you wanted to sit on the ground level, you don't want to have to bring it up, move it up every time you drag it into Unity. So if you set the origin to the bottom, it's going to be a little more logical when you use it later on in Unity. So you can actually reset that by choosing the cursor tool, and then you can click to place that. And I'm going to drag with my middle mouse button just to help me set that more logically. Click a little bit. I think I'll bring it over too. Once you have that in the right location, you can switch to your select tool and go ahead and select all the elements in your model. And then you're going to go to Object menu and look for Set Origin. And we're going to pick Origin to 3D Cursor. That way, again, it's going to be a little logical when you drag in the objects that their origin is sort of centered at the bottom of the object. Sometimes when importing a model into Unity, it may appear as if some of the faces are invisible. And this could be caused by the normals of those faces pointing inwards. If you're experiencing that issue, you can reset the normals so that they always point outward. And if you're trying to remember what a normal is, you can kind of see them when you're editing objects. And we use tools like extrude where you have the yellow bar sticking out. That's kind of like perpendicular to the object. That's called a normal. And let me give you a good workflow just to reset all of them so they're measured in a way that's compatible with Unity. Again, sometimes a problem is some of the faces where it thinks the normals point inwards look like they're actually gone once you get into Unity. So I'm going to select the model, and then I'm going to switch over to edit mode for this particular feature. And then we'll make sure everything's selected here. So I'll go to select all. And then to correct the direction of how the normals are calculated, you go to mesh and then normals and choose recalculate outside. And it looks the same to me in Blender, but that little step is going to help it be more compatible with Unity. And then I can switch back to object mode. The last tip I want to mention is that you might want to avoid using planes if you need to see both sides of them. Planes are technically 2D objects, and there's an issue over in Unity that it can only render one side of the plane. So you should never really have a plane that's supposed to be a face that you're looking at from both sides. What I would recommend instead is use a cube. You can always start with a cube and make it a fairly flat shape. And that's going to render better in Unity because it needs to have a separate face physically for each side that is rendered. So use cubes instead of planes, maybe for some objects. And I think this one's fine. Everything in here was built from cubes or cylinders. There's no 2D objects left in this model. So at this point, I could save, and then this is ready to drop into Unity.